and welcome to the Kuyumungi Institute, our Q&A Conversation for Exploration series. I'm Paul Robert, the Executive Director and President of the Institute, and along with my wife, Laura Lee, the Director of Research, Education, and Outreach, and on behalf of our Board of Directors, our advisors, our volunteers, and supporting members, we want to thank you for joining us today. The Kuyumungi Institute is an independent, nonprofit research organization committed to researching consciousness and the human experience, following the footsteps of our founder, anthropologist Dr. Felicitas Goodman. And as an educational institution, we take an open approach and we invite scholars in related fields that help us broaden the scope of our own work and exploration. And that's why we call this Conversation for Exploration. On these Sunday discussions, we've had a full spectrum of topics: neuroscience, anthropology, archaeology, archaeoastronomy, ecology, philosophy, mythology, shamanism, roots of theater, deep history, art history. It's from the arts to the sciences. And we invite you to visit our website at kuyumungiinstitute.com. All of our presentations are free, and as a nonprofit, of course, we invite you to become a supporting member, and we want to thank you, the community members who continue to support the mission of the Kuyumungi Institute. Today, the advancement of technology from the fields of artificial intelligence and robotics is on the cusp of revolutionizing our lives. Robotics is the fastest growing, evolving field, and there's probably not a single industry that's being left untouched by these technologies. And like it or not, within the next decade, robots will be massively integrated into most aspects of our lives. And while many of us still have some mixed feelings about this technology, the truth is we can't go back. We can't prevent this ongoing advancement of technology. So this is not about promoting the use, it's just simply saying the reality is already here. The future's upon us now.
And what are the implications?
And what are those implications? We have to ask ourselves, how will robots change the world, and especially from a positive perspective? Here's what's been going on. Robots will be our drivers, and we already have self-driving cars. They'll be our companions, our co-workers, our teachers, surgeons, the exploration, pioneers in space and beyond. I mean, like we just mentioned a few minutes ago, already the James Webb Telescope and all the detailed research that's already been discovered around the universe. The capabilities of this technology will only grow as scientists and engineers continue to innovate. Robots have the potential to improve the quality of our life for billions of people and help us reach new horizons of our planet and beyond. And it's already become a key resource for health professionals, helping them monitor and focus on patients more effectively. And we're told by 2030, robots could be performing surgeries from halfway around the globe. So again, AI is already here. It's already alternating the world that we know. And so it raises that important question for us as a global family.
Well, I'm interested in the whole evolutionary arc of robots. I mean, first we imagine them in sci-fi.
Yeah.
Right? And what was it? The Day the Earth Stood Still, you had Klaatu had a personal robot. What was his name? Gort? And he was the bodyguard, right? And so no sensible alien would dare go to space without their robot, right? Because for flesh is fragile. Right? Life is fragile. Robots, machines, they're stronger. They can go into toxic environments. They can be where we can't be without air and space. Right? They can do a lot that we can't do. They can go where we can't go. So I think that's interesting. You had Star Wars where, and I took note of this, the sensible, helpful robot R2-D2, he looked like a shop vac.
Yeah.
He was the smart one. The human-looking robot, C-3PO, he had those annoying human personality traits. They gave him the human look and the human personality. So we don't yet have personal robots, companions. But, I wonder if it's going to be like the telephone, right? The first cell phone, people were saying, you could actually read this in the paper, people say, who needs it? Well, everybody needs it because it can do so much more than place a phone call.
Right.
So I'm thinking the first personal robots, what can we load them up to do? But how vulnerable will that make us when everything gets unplugged? We won't be able to do anything for ourselves, right? I mean, this is an interesting trajectory that we're going down. So I wonder about that. Our guest today, an entrepreneur in robotics and artificial intelligence. He's employed that for end of life care, for hospice care. And talk about a growth industry. He has a humanitarian and a very compassionate stance with this. He wants to help those for whom traditionally it has been very hard and very expensive to provide adequate full-time care, those in need. And who can object to that? And yet, what it comes with such a whole host of questions. And our personal robot's just one step in this long evolutionary dance that we've had with technology. And where is it going to end? What is the future going to be? It's exciting to ask. Michael, I don't even know how to sound it.
Kapoustin.
Kapoustin. We met socially.
Close.
And here's a guy you can't stop talking to.
Yeah.
Here's the guy you can't stop talking to, right? Ask him any question, and he's going to give a very interesting answer. And you can go on and on for hours.
Hi,
so
Michael.
we had to invite him here today.
Well, you're very
because really,
gracious,
you know,
Laura. Thank
we
you so
love to
much.
talk to people who are in the trenches doing and bringing and changing the future.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining us today. So
Thank you for having me.
who's your companion in the background?
That's UJAP. I'll explain the name later. The device itself, and to make sure to just all of the viewers right now, we are not interested in the actual building of the hardware, but that evolution is handled by larger industries, both small startups and big corporations like Samsung and Boston Robotics and others. Our objective is not the actual device itself, but the application of device in our social infrastructure. How can these devices be made available and be truly practical integrations into our day-to-day lives? And where should that type of integration begin? Currently, as I'm sure many of you, I've looked at some of the background of many of our viewers right now. Currently, these devices are more novelties than they are practical applications. They're meant with single operators and a single device. So while they are lovely and entertaining, they still have to evolve into a practical utilization. And so our goal, our mission for our startup and the current company is to bring together the technologies, the hardware developers and the software developers, and working with some of a couple of patents that I've succeeded in getting, and of course a lot of other intellectual enterprises, and coming up with a humanistic and holistic approach to the integration of these machines in the future of mankind, which is why I was so fascinated by your organization and human anthropology, and looking at the past, and where I posited the question, let's take a moment and step back and look into the future and how that will impact on society. And you mentioned Klaatu, one of my favorite movies, The Day the Earth Stood Still. I can remember him coming off of the spaceship, and when our visitor was shot, obviously first human reaction is to shoot everything. Okay, which is unfortunate. Hopefully we're wiser than that when the actual moment comes. But the fascination with this goes back even further, and if we could arguably say that Frankenstein was the first robot. Because in reality, she didn't have machines or the concept of mechanical devices to assemble, and so she basically assembled a being out of the biological components that she could gather that were inanimate, and then created a creature infused with electricity, interestingly enough, and a variety of other things to become mobile and be animated. Then it goes then in movie. In film, the first representation of a robot, the first iRobot, was in a 1917 silent movie by a German director, and where you'll see the image of the robot, which is a female, and it looks exactly like the one that Tesla wants to build, and Elon Musk announced. And there's very little difference, and this is 1917. Our fascination, and I think we all will admit to this, extends for a very, very long time. And it is actually integrated into the anthropology of of humanity. And I think
Well, I
even
can
if we
take
go
you back
back,
to the Paleolithic caves, and there you have bison,
exactly.
human hybrids, or the Lion Man statue. You have a lion who's also a man, hybrids, and now we can have artificial knees and shoulders and
Hips
organs,
and
and yeah, who knows what. So yeah, that long
So
integration.
this has been going on for a very long time. So now the question is now we've achieved the ability to actually develop these devices in a more sophisticated way and to give them some intelligence. The word artificial is a great word because the intelligence so far, even from the most sophisticated supercomputers and cloud computing solutions, Google is among the leaders in that, obviously, are still not achieved the level of intelligence that we really need for these things to be able to do what we need them or would like them to do.
There's a strength that we want to harness, right? So we go back to that early cave painting, and the hybrid human was a stronger animal than humans. I mean, we're pretty puny when it comes to it. Where are our claws and where are our fangs, right? They've been evolved out of us. But so we want to connect with something stronger and more capable, has superpowers beyond our own. So that is interesting, right? A lion and a man, more powerful. And now you've got a robot and its strengths. What are the particular strengths that a robot or this machinery or artificial intelligence can imbue to our lives? I mean, let's detail what they bring. Faster
In our particular,
calculations. Yeah.
in our particular case, and as you mentioned in the introduction, I am more fascinated and enamored with the idea of how it can help the elderly and the infirm.
Yeah. I guess my question was,
Those of
they're faster. They can withstand repetition or boring jobs. They can go into more dangerous environments. They can go into environments we cannot go in. Metal is stronger than flesh, right? So those are some of the attributes.
I agree, but I think, and that those would be the ones you might imagine if you're thinking about a military robot or an industrial robot or
Yeah.
something that has to perform a function that a human being really can't perform.
Thank you, because I was just about to get to the other interesting part, which is a friend of mine was telling us about a very popular app in Asia somewhere. And he's saying that for people who want companionship and people who are distressed, they can take this app, talk to this app, and the app will give them measured responses that are compassionate, that are wise, that are friendly, that are supportive. And people are describing that this relationship is one of the most important relationships in their lives. And it's geared on artificial intelligence.
Wow.
So they build an algorithm and they say, what is your issue? Explain. Now they'll bring an appropriate response. So I think that is really fascinating. I think that is, it's interesting to me that it didn't need a human face. It didn't need to be dispensed by a human. That kind of care was dispensed by a
And your point is
machine, by an
taken.
app.
One of your guests in our earlier conversation discussed. I think it actually popped a question about should these things look like people, which Elon Musk, that's his goal, is to make them look like people. And the Japanese actually are quite fascinated with the idea, and they're very advanced on this sort of Walt Disney animatronics. If you remember, he was Disney was one of the first leaders in robotic characters in Disneyland, where they had the programmed animatronics. And we're going back to the 1960s, which were images of historic figures that were actually programmed in these large data centers to move their arms and their hands, and very sophisticated technology to be able to do that. And there is a question of, do we want them to look like people, or do we want them simply to perform
Yeah, and
to
Thomas
perform
said
their
the jury's
function?
out on that, so I'm going to get his
Yeah,
response
and that
in detail.
and exactly, the Asians seem to be inclined to want to get this really very human looking device. Where I oddly enough, I think maybe, and this is an interesting piece of a study of social culture, is why are they more inclined to want to look towards a device that has a more human appearance, whereas Western society seems to be more inclined to keep the machine looking like a machine and letting it do its job. So it would be an interesting study to ask the question of why are these two East and West looking at the problem, at least how we present the solution.
And
The
that's a very
mechanics are basically the
anthropological
same.
question, isn't it? Because I'm sure
Yeah.
that the robot that helped Amazon pack my latest order did not need to look like a human. It
Didn't look
was
anything. No.
ergonomically designed to do its job, pick and pack and like whatever it did.
And maybe coming back to
Stuff.
a more fundamental question, which Woody, who is a NASA
Oh,
researcher and
yes.
engineer, brought up. He says, how
Yes,
do we
Tony.
define the term robot? At what point does it become robot versus just some electronic technology? Where does that term come into effect?
Like what
That's a
is and
big
what
question.
isn't a robot?
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
big question.
Well, I honestly, it's been a challenge for me to even define I wonder where the definition, I'm sure there's more intelligent people than me to be able to turn around and study the history of the
They'll
word
weigh
and
in.
its evolution. But for me, when I try to describe this, I describe it as a self-powered, semi-autonomous device capable of executing some sort of a function. Robot, but I mean, I've got a vacuum cleaner that's a robot. Okay, we
Oh,
are
the
working with a
Roomba.
prototype. We're working
Yeah.
with a prototype robot dog. So that, and you've probably seen him in some sci-fi movies, that Boston Robotics was one of the first ones to introduce the idea. And now the military is actually testing out robotic dogs that are basically that they can put into the field as opposed to a living dog. And I'll talk about that in a second on one of my patents. And but how do you describe a robot? I would say a semi-autonomous, and I use the word semi-autonomous or maybe fully, because our robots are all now semi-autonomous. They're not intelligent to be fully autonomous. So a semi-autonomous or autonomous device with the capacity to execute functions without any direction. So I mean,
And
honestly,
that's key,
what's a
without any
human being?
direction, because the term is bandied about widely. So I had to drop in on trying to find out where robots used today, and there's a TV show about Battle of the Bots or something.
Oh,
If that's a robot, these machines beating each other up, then so is a little kid guiding a car right down the street. That's not a robot. That is
No,
a
it's not. Not
yeah,
absolutely, Laura, not in the pure sense. Even the device behind me, which is
yeah.
manufactured by a company in Southern California, and there's several manufacturers of similar devices. When I'm asked to describe it, I say it's a tablet on a pogo stick with a remote control card. It is by no stretch of the imagination our fantastic vision of what a robot is. I
Or
mean,
will be in the future.
these are managed devices. They have some intelligence. They're able to map a room. They've got radar not to collide. They can say hello. They can do a few other things. But ultimately, for the moment, at least at this price range, it requires a human being to be giving instructions to the device to execute a function. For our purposes, it works quite well as a first iteration because it has to interact with people and has to connect people. But for the long term, the fact is that all of these devices right now are semi-autonomous. Yeah, and even the driving car, quote unquote, utilizing all of these sensors, couldn't really be described as a robot. It has no real intelligence. It just won't hit anything, and it can follow a path
It's probably a
that it
first step,
downloads.
right? A first step of acceptance,
It's the first step.
deployment,
Yeah.
economics before it's like the cell phone, right? You just keep adding a lot more functions to it, and then it becomes indispensable, right? So Frederick is defining a robot. He's quoting Isaac Asimov: "A robot may not injure a human being, or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. A robot must obey orders given it by human beings, except where such orders would conflict with the first law. A robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second law." I love it. See, sci-fi has been all over this
I
for
remember
decades.
Asimov. I remember
Yeah.
when he came up with that in his book.
Yeah, and
That's
sci-fi
actually
is
not the
such an
definition,
important sci-fi is
not a
such an
definition of
important field to explore this, to
yeah,
look at the moral issues, to kind of map this out for humanity.
right.
It's a good place to try this interface and start to define it. Or are you changing things? I mean, you're there, you're an entrepreneur, you're working in artificial intelligence and robotics, you're applying this to healthcare. Are you and your colleagues helping to redefine the industry or the notion of robots and
Yeah.
well,
helping to
yeah,
usher
I
in
think
a certain way?
To a large degree, we seem to be oddly in a trajectory that's not currently being, which to our advantage, obviously. We'll see if we can. Things don't happen in vacuums, so we seem to be the only ones looking at this. That may change in due course, but we just think that first that the concept of humanizing the process, we need to use the devices right now not as replacements for human beings, but as augmentation for human beings. Methods to enrich our social culture, not to detract from our social culture. One of the ideas we have is to globalize labor through these devices, which means that instead of having a flow of immigrants trying to exchange locations in order to improve their lives, which currently is the nature of our social structure, that the introduction of these types of devices on a broad scale and bringing the cost of them down to where they're actually feasible will allow, if you can imagine, globalization of labor without anybody ever having to leave their home. So we could populate our richer cities and countries with all sorts of labor resources, with devices that are semi-autonomous but intelligently managed, and the individual could be working and living in their own country and the economics of scale using a device like this. And you could interact with her, but so one of our ideas is we could globalize labor through robotic devices. And this means that caregiving, and particularly in the sector that I've been fascinated with, that means that caregivers, there's a tremendous shortage of, and it's not going to get better, it's only going to get worse, could achieve the goal of providing care by bringing in thousands or tens of thousands of caregivers without ever having to leave their country by utilizing these devices. So
Right.
I just think that the application of the technology is critical. The technology will evolve. Stephen Jobs didn't invent the cell phone. Stephen Jobs didn't invent the technology that makes up the cell phone. What Stephen Jobs said is, I'm going to make this thing really intelligent and put it all together in a way that nobody else has done.
And paid
In our
attention to
view,
the aesthetics of it as well.
which is critical. And so he just said, I'm going to pull all this stuff together and turn it into something. There were lots of ideas. I remember in the late 70s and early 80s with the ideas of phones we'd be wearing, computers we'd be wearing on our wrists, and all of these startups trying to find ways to implement these new technologies. And now look what we have. We have low-flying satellites that are giving the internet to the Ukraine and making the internet more accessible all over the globe. We've got 5G technology now that can deliver data to any place where you're walking or wanting to travel. Pretty soon, the globe is networked, and these devices will ultimately be part of that network.
Because that needs to happen for this global economy to run with these devices.
Right. And the United States, I believe that the U.S. economy in the next decades will be driven by AI, robotics, and probably space travel. I believe that's the future of the U.S. The internet during the Clinton era, I don't know how many are familiar with it. The reason the U.S. economy went into a positive balance for the first time in decades during the Clinton era was specifically because of the internet and technology. There was just so much money being made globally, and the U.S. was leading the way. And I believe the United States is going to lead the way in robotics, artificial intelligence, and of course, space travel, and how all that's networked. And so the value proposition here is to get started early with an idea that can enrich human existence, not detract from human existence.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, what is it? Salish Rao was saying that he believes that technology was a necessary part of our evolution to deploy the climate change, to deploy the solutions that are needed today, that we're at that time when we must employ technology to the benefit, but have the wisdom to do so. In the ecozoic, right? The two need to come together to truly pave a future for everyone, right? It's one spaceship Earth.
Yeah.
It's one family. We're all here together. So,
Well, I just think we're at a point, there's a lot of anxiety and about where we're going as a culture, as a planet, as a humanity, and how is this all going to turn out? And there's always the next generation has a responsibility that's been multiplied by so much development and what's happening. And those of us of a certain age are saying, where the heck is this all going to go? And how can I navigate and be a part of it in a positive way?
go with the benefits, right? Like
Yeah.
the benefit statement. What's the benefit
right.
statement? Okay, there's one other point in history that I think is real interesting here. So when chloroform first came out to be used as an anesthesia, and it was employed for soldiers and getting wounds healed and childbirth, there was a religious uproar. Well, the Bible says that women must suffer to bear children. It's right there in the Bible. So women should have pain, that alleviating pain is going against the Bible. There was that outcry. And this was in Queen Victoria's day. And so when she had many children, her last two children, they used chloroform. At first they thought it was dangerous. People had died with it. It was deemed safe enough for the Queen. So she pronounced it, oh, very nice. I highly recommend it. Boom, right? It was ushered in. And I think that the benefits are going to be what ushered this in.
It has, yeah.
Right? Who could say no to one's elderly mother getting the 24/7 care that she needs, right, by an assistant robot, by kids trying to take care of their elderly. It's expensive, it's difficult, it's fraught. And then you've got the caretakers, right? This is boring. It would be boring. It would be excruciatingly difficult to be 24/7 caring for someone, right? To read to them, to run and get the water, the pill, to whatever they need, right? That's hard work. It's not difficult work. It's just hard, emotionally work.
Numbing.
So yeah, I couldn't do that for my own mother, right? So the benefits I think are going to be.
They are significant. We've obviously taken this device and taken it to families and discussed it in assisted living facilities. And everyone's really fascinated with the idea of how their first iteration is companions, because most of the first level is companion care before you get into the skilled care, where the actual nursing and the diagnostics. But even we're testing the skilled care as well, the ability to if we had our video working, I could show you the use of this in a hospital in North Carolina, being operated by a nurse on the floor, where she's just, the robot moves around the floor and basically socially interacts with people. So this concept of companion or services, it's just simply that the method that's being applied for its utilization is still prohibitive, very narrow banded, and it doesn't really fit the bigger problem. It still has that nature of a novelty as opposed to a solution. And as did the first cell phones, as did the first television sets, as did the first electric cars. Everything sort of starts out on novelty until somebody sits and figures out, well, here's the problem. We need to make this more acceptable to society, integrate it more into what's really required, and then become more specialized. And one of the things that we're approaching is this global network where the devices are semi-autonomous, still have a human operator, and then have the ability for one operator to run 10 or 20 devices, just monitoring them as they go through their daily routine.
The scale of the economics can
exactly
make sense for your average person.
Yeah, and the exciting part of this as well is that the technologies, as you had said earlier, Laura, the technology is moving so quickly and advancing, and as you had, as well, Paul had reiterated, is that these are things that, while they're extremely expensive, we have. They now have. I was watching a gentleman writing that they were involved in the development of the robotic arm on the space station, and somebody else had developed a robotic arm that could probably pick up a cup and stuff. And if we could share the video with you, but you probably all of the viewers probably know this. They've now and it's being used in medicine and already being utilized, which is remotely controlling robotic arms from a great distance in real time with haptic feedback, where the operator can actually feel what he or she is touching during the course of that. Now, these are $50,000, $60,000, $100,000 devices, but as we all know, the scale of economics will bring those devices and make them more affordable. And then little machines like this will actually have arms attached to them, and they can give you a nice massage and prepare your meal for you and do your laundry. And if somebody said to me, when's that going to happen? I'd say it's going to happen within the next 5 or 6 years or less.
Wow. Yeah, that's
And because it's already there. It's just a matter of production and scaling. We are even in conversations with companies that manufacture such devices and are putting them out in the field primarily in high risk work where they have to handle hazardous devices remotely. And of course, this was being utilized in the nuclear industry for handling nuclear rods decades ago. So as you and I have often spoke, there's Ecclesiastes, there's really nothing new under the sun. It's just a matter of it arriving on time and in the right space.
Arriving on time and in the right. Well, of course, of course, there's going to be hacking. There's going to be used for
there's always abuse.
Ill, right?
There's abuse.
It's always going to be exploited for the. I mean, it's just going to be another tool for people to exploit. But let's take some questions from the audience.
Yeah, we can incorporate that as well.
I think there's a lot going on here that.
Well, what you just pointed out. I mean, obviously, a person with the wrong intentions can manipulate it, just like someone can hack into your computer and your cell phone and misuse that data and that information. So there has to be.
The government's going through.
There's a security element to the whole thing, but we can't stop the advancement of technology based on that anxiety. Yeah. We have to figure out a way to securely proceed in a way that this technology can help us. I'm still from a generation where you didn't have to have technology in your home to survive, and that kind of technology.
Oh, there's always been technology.
Yeah, there's always been something, whether it was a can opener or what.
And it's been surprisingly sophisticated, as Thomas Wynn told us, looking at the 2 million years worth of hand axes.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, there you go. Yeah, that's technology. Yeah.
Paul, can I share a screenshot with you? I want to talk about one thing before we move on to questions.
Yeah.
The one thing we haven't discussed is we've talked about jumping from human being and a biological creature to a completely mechanical one, right? But we know the problems with the mechanical one. So I want to show you something. This is what my patent is. I hope I can share my screen with you. That is an AI mounted on a dog.
He's wearing a collar.
Yeah, he's wearing, do you see the body harness?
Cameras, right?
The body on cameras, 5G connection, microcomputers, and it's transmitting that data. It reads both the dog's biological state, tries to reads but the uniqueness of the patent is it reads the dog's biological state in order to understand the state of the handler.
Emotional.
There's the dog. So the dog's emotional state actually can the AI learns the dog's emotional state over time, develops a baseline, and then if that state is disrupted for any reason, it sets off an alert in order for potentially human intervention to determine if the elderly person or the person the dog is with is in distress. So we're reading the dog's biometrics, and at the same time, the external sensors are reading the biometrics and utilizing thermodynamic imaging and geospatial mapping to determine the state of the patient or of the handler. The advantage of the dog is it has empathy, it has affection, it's more intelligent than any artificial intelligence currently on the market or in the near future, and it is devoted typically to its owner, and its proximity to its owner and its mobility make it a hybrid between robotics and AI. And so our objective, and that's what the device looks like in this particular rendering. And that was the patent that was granted to me actually in 2020. It took a few years to get it.
This is your patent? This is your invention?
That's my invention, yes.
Oh my God. Okay, so first of all, we've had this tremendously long existing relationship with the canine friends, right?
Exactly correct.
Dogs already can sniff diabetes or epilepsy in their owners and alert them, right? So they already perform that. But those are expensive dogs that need to be highly trained. This doesn't have. This is your pet. And perform that same function. Be programmed for that. Wow.
Yeah, and that was the idea that I started writing in 2016, because one of the problems with robotics and robots was the absence of, actually, I don't think I've got a good picture of that, I'll stop sharing that, but was the absence of they were not mobile, they were not intelligent. If they lost their connection, they were incapable of doing anything. And so, and there are 80 million dogs in the United States alone. I don't even want to think about globally. And I'm sure that all of us have seen the images of how a dog is used as a pet therapy or a compassion animal that'll sit next to its owner. I extrapolated that and I said, okay, great. Well, let's do this. Let's read the dog's biometrics and let's read the owner's biometrics, and let's use some of the newer technology in thermodynamic imaging and using and geospatial mapping, and then let the AI learn everything that's going around with these two particular individuals, and then be able to alert an operator that there may be some crisis or some event, or not even a crisis or event, but some progress in the biological state of the human being or the dog that would cause us to take concern and want to give attention to it. And this is sort of the transitionary stage. And I think I saw somebody commenting it about putting chips in our brains, and so I don't think we need to go that far. I'm sure that we will be augmenting our physical state or the physical state of the creatures that are part of our social infrastructure. And the anthropology of these lovely animals, of these partners of us in this world, this empathy that exists, inexplicably exists, but wonderfully, is something that I think we should actually build on. And that relationship is far warmer than just a cold machine.
That is so brilliant, because we're already wearing those tracking devices on our fingers, on our wrists, wherever. And so you've taken existing technology, you've just applied it in this new way. You've taken an existing companionship relation, cross species, long-standing. You've taken the role of our pets in our home and amplified those. It's already existing. That is brilliant.
Yeah.
That is brilliant. How many of these have you sold?
Not selling. Well, actually, we're just now at the stage. I had the patent grant. I waited until the IP was. I didn't want to talk about it until I had the intellectual property secured. And I finally, when I got that was last year. So now we're just in the process of prototyping, and we hopefully will do a proof of concept by running a campaign to pre-sell some of the units.
So you've heard it here first.
Yeah.
Actually, you are, Laura and
Yeah.
Paul, you are correct. This is the first time I've spoken about it publicly in any venue. It's the first time I've spoken about it.
That could be really cool.
So I thought it would be fun. It would be fun to introduce it to the two of you, because I knew that because of your intellect and that of obviously that of your following and your fascination with your organization with anthropology, because the study of the human condition is critical to the study of the future of the human condition. As we had talked about, it's important to know where we've been and how we got here in order to project where we're going to go, at least to some degree of accuracy.
Right? Yeah. I know of people, if you need some beta testers, I know of people who have some medical conditions and pets who follow them, who are there with them. That I got a list for you.
Yeah, well, I have a feeling that list is going to be extremely long when we do finally go public with this thing in the next, hopefully in the next couple of months. But I'm quite enthusiastic. It's just that the relationship between and this amazing historic 40,000-year relationship between ourselves and this animal, it just seemed more prudent to augment its existing intelligence with machine intelligence. And that was my goal.
Well, in the bond that we already have with those pets. I mean, this is beyond what the Navy used to take dolphins and equip them, right? Well, this is the right use of that, right?
Yeah, the patent examiner, when I talked to the patent examiner, his first impression was that I was just monitoring the dog's health.
Yeah.
And he said, explain this to me again. And I said, no, listen carefully. I'm not monitoring the dog. I'm monitoring the dog's owner. And he was going, excuse me, I'm monitoring the dog's owner. Then I'm monitoring the dog to determine the dog's emotional state.
Because the
so that I can figure out if
the owners.
Right.
It has empathy. So I'm trying to capture the empathy of the dog towards the human being that's next to it to determine if the human being is in distress, because the dog will go into distress because of its relationship. Now, what robot's going to do that?
Right. Right.
What
Yeah.
robot is
We're
going to be
getting
in
the nod
distress?
from your
Yeah.
your
That's right.
robot background.
And it's almost like it'd be a good spouse tool as well. But
Oh.
even though
Oh.
Laura has no problem communicating her needs. Tony has his hand up. I was going to have Tony ask his question. Hi, Tony.
There's some great comments here in the chat.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
yeah, this is also interesting. On the chipping of humans, I heard a very interesting discussion once of, as objectionable as this sounds, would you have your kids chipped if all of a sudden their IQ would be increased by 60 points and their ability to compete in the world augmented? And then the question kind of is like, where does the chip, the intelligence end, and we begin, and what is the robot? Do we become a robot then? That was what that question was about. I do worry about the implication of robotics, and I agree with you, it's coming. But what is this going to do in terms of jobs and the ability of people to make a living? Are we going to have a lower class now? We don't have a middle class for all practical purposes at this point. What is going to happen? How will this affect us? When I was in engineering school, I know we were told in orientation as a freshman, prepare yourself. The work week is going to be 28 hours and the rest will be leisure, and you can engineer for leisure. Well, most of my career,
Right, that didn't work out.
most of my career, I've worked between 60 and 80 hours a week, so that did not ring true. But I'm just wondering about these things.
That's a great question.
Tony, it's a pleasure to meet you, sir. It's a fair question, but it's not a new question. It happened. The same question was asked during the Industrial Revolution, and the same question was asked probably when somebody came up with the first piece of bronze tool. Well, is this going to replace me? Because now I can do the work of 3 people with this new tool. I think what it is that historically we've demonstrated that what these things actually improve our quality of life. They don't detract from it. In my earlier comments, I mentioned the concept behind, for us as a small company, is to globalize labor. So we would actually be raising the middle class, the lower class to the middle class, because we'd be able to distribute some of the incredible wealth that's so concentrated in Western countries globally to the other countries that need it, without our concerns of having to, I guess, to take the economic pressure of new individuals displacing themselves in order to be able to come here to work for less money and can't live well here. So I think that if robotics and this whole concept of AI and robotics is applied humanistically, hopefully there'll be wisdom at that level, that ultimately we will actually bring up all of society. We won't be bringing it down. We'll actually be raising it.
I like how you say that hopefully there will be wisdom, but can we count on that?
I can't. That I can't attest. Okay, so
one of the things I was startled at, and you mentioned being able to monitor these things with COVID, was all of a sudden it became clear that everything I did, every motion I made, every person I came in proximity to was being watched by the government. And this became
and that is that actually was a process that was started in Korea and China very aggressively, and then translated here. Because they actually started doing that during the first SARS epidemic. I never can say that word. Their government agencies develop software programs and applications to track and relate. In fact, we wrote a software program and during COVID, that was an application that would actually track connections. The government didn't buy it, but the idea was that you wear the phone and eye contact so-and-so, I went to this place. And then if COVID arrived in any of those individuals, then you'd be able to backtrack in order to try to discover who may have been potentially infected with it. I guess Tony, it comes to the question, and I'm sure Laura and Paul have much richer things to say about this, but to me personally, it really comes to the question of benefit. My individuality and my privacy is critical to me, but how does society as a whole benefit? And anthropology says that history says that we work better if we collaborate, and we have to agree to surrender some independence in order to be able to get the benefit of a proper social network and get support. I mean, you're living in a beautiful home. It got built by a collaboration of efforts, not by you. And then you had to surrender your privacy. People know what your house looks like, and they know the materials it was built for, but you would never give up the opportunity to live in that home. So I think that this comes to the measure of the question of how. And the beauty of our humanity is that we have individuals like yourself and others who and Paul and Maura, who keep asking these questions okay, I'm giving you power, but are you using the power fairly or wisely? And as long as we don't put anybody in control who seeks to oppress that, then I think society in all of its chaos will ultimately exit with the right answer.
Yes. Well, you also mentioned 5G, and without doing a rant on this, one of my clients just received in extremely many, of the order of 10,000 units from one of the companies in the US for doing laser crosslinks. This means of the order of 10,000 new satellites. There are 3 other companies putting up a similar number. There are entities in Europe and Asia doing the same thing. The predictions are, and this enables 5G everywhere, as you said. The unexpected consequence is, first of all, there seems to be no method for international regulation of number of satellites. And the artifact may be that in a few years, when a child looks up at the sky at night, he may say, what is that satellite that's not moving? That stars will be rare sightings compared to things streaking across the sky. There are many other things on this, but there are questions we have to ask about the unexpected consequence in every way, and these are questions I kind of go to. I also was interested. You mentioned the space station, the robotic arm. I'm quite familiar with that actually. My team developed the cameras on the robotic arm, the Canada arm, and they call it a robotic arm. Would you call that a full robotic arm? I see it more as a mechanized arm, but I'd like to know what you think.
Well, again, it comes to the word, what do we want to call a robot? I would not call it, I think the word is used loosely, sort of robotic.
I think so too.
I think it's simply an articulating mechanical arm that's as an operator. The same way a backhoe has do we call backhoes robots? No, we call it a backhoe. Okay, so, because it's an articulating arm that can pick something up and move it. So
one thing that may be articulated is how it grapples what comes in at the end. That may be robotic, but in terms of how it moves around and et cetera, I don't think.
I wonder if we would use the word robotic to say something that appears to be human-like in its function. Maybe the word is, for instance, I use the analogy to a backhoe. There are some pretty sophisticated backhoes out there.
Oh yeah,
they can do some pretty amazing things. And you can do that too if you'd like. And the thing is that no one calls them robots. And I just wonder if the definition might be that the operator is not actually in the device, but external from the device. So because you're not in the device, but you're outside of the device, it becomes robotic. Or because of the fact that it's human, it has human-like characteristics like articulating the fingers or grappling. And again, I think the word's used loosely, like I think the word love is used loosely. I think a lot of people say love and it really isn't. So to me, I think a lot of people say robot and it's really not. It just seems to be something people like to attribute to certain.
This kind of goes to this question, and we're kind of dealing with the interface between where being a robot begins and where a robot doesn't begin. And it's a very interesting question, and I appreciate you commenting on that.
Yeah.
And I appreciate the question. I think I love the questions that are popping up on the screen. I think I could go on for the whole day on this one. I know we won't, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tony.
Well, thank you, Tony. Yeah. Love you, Tony.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I see.
Thomas. I have to go to Thomas.
Okay. Thomas Riccio over here. Yeah. There he is.
Yeah. Hi.
Yes.
Hi, Thomas.
Hey, Thomas. Good to see you.
Thomas is the narrative director for a robotics company trying to help usher in and articulate and define that relationship? I'm sure you have a lot to share on this, Thomas.
Yeah, just a definition.
I do more social robots, and it's similar. Of course, it's a robot that's interacting with humans, and maybe its function and its objectives are quite different than what the dog augmentation is, which I really admire. And I have 2 dogs myself, and I empathize and sympathize with everything you're doing, and I think it's wonderful. But and actually Hansen is working on a healthcare robot. Their next robot is that, because it is a large and expanding market, because the world is aging, China is aging, and he's based in Hong Kong, and the Chinese market is really quite large. And my mom is in a assisted living, and she's there primarily because she needs to be taken care of. And when she was still living at home, it was very lonely for her because a lot of her friends are dying, etc. So that's definitely, I think, a need. I'm agreeing with everything's being said, and it's kind of confirming notions I have already of and kind of filling out some thought and provoking further thought. So yeah, it's very much a part of our world, and it's the future of humanity will not be human, basically. I mean, we may transcend into some post-human state beyond us. And so right now, it's kind of like an axial age for robotics and humans. What do we want from them? And what do we bring that's good, hopefully, and sustainable to the future? What do we plant? Because I've been in situations where I've seen a lot of DARPA funding, for instance, a large quote unquote disaster relief robot. And it didn't take much of a leap of the imagination to see it equipped with weaponry. It's robust, and seeing it in front of me, like 7 feet tall with armaments, and be able to lift like concrete blocks. I mean, I would have no idea how to stop it. And its precision of and accuracy, which we admire in our AI and our robots, can be used against it. So that's it's really, I think the discussion is about humans and what do we want out of it?
Yeah.
How do we want to use our tools and the collaboration?
Use our tools.
Yeah.
You work with Sophia, and she's kind of a famous social robot. How necessary is it for a robot to look like a human for us to relate to it? Or how does that change the relationship or not?
Yeah, it's the big uncanny valley issue, which was posited like in the early 70s. I think for some, it's still a large issue. For Hansen, it's essentially, it's a non-issue. We relate, as you do now, to my facial expressions as much as to my tone of my voice and to my verbiage. And probably more so to, if I were like off camera, you'd probably relate differently. So the facial interactions, the eye movements, the nod of the head, the fact that we have mirror responses in one another. If I do something, you probably would indicate a likeness and an affirmation by doing a similar gesture. All these things are very much a part of how we communicate. And that's kind of the premise of David's pursuit, his dogged pursuit of like making them human-like as possible. His take essentially is that they're coming, and how you establish a relationship with robots will determine all that follows. So, how Plato established a way of thinking of the world basically influenced Aristotle and moved forward and influenced Western culture. And now we're realizing, maybe some of that was kind of erroneous and kind of misguided, and maybe it was great for its time, but no longer, good for our time, and we need revision. And so we're doing revisions. So likewise, the parallel thinking is for David is that if we establish something they're compassionate and they're interactive, with humans, with humanity at central, then that will be how they evolve. Because right now, the first impression many people have when you say robots is like being destroyed. They think of Terminator. They default to Terminator. They default to all these destructive, apocalyptic visions. And that's across the board. And that's because those were the first images that were kind of planted, like Maria in Metropolis. I mean, she looked great. She was a babe, but at the same time, she was destructive.
She was. She
And
was.
so
And
it played
Frankenstein
on.
destroyed his creator, right? So where, it's that concept. And I think that's why it goes back to, the creator ends up getting destroyed by his creation. And it seems to be a dogged, redundant theme, Laura and Paul and all of anthropology. We're going to be destroyed. The creator is going to be destroyed by his creation. Lucifer wants to just take over heaven and control. I mean,
Well,
there seems
Shakespeare
to be
addressed it in The Tempest, and there's been some good sci-fi based on that. Yeah.
So I agree with Tom, and it's and Sophie is a really interesting social experiment for me, more than for me personally, it's a social experiment and less one that actually has a real practical application, like my friend here behind me. But it is an important social experiment, because you're right, it is going to happen. I don't foresee that, probably not within my lifetime, actually becoming integrated into society to that level. I mean, if Elon Musk manages to pull it off by his deadline date, which I seriously doubt, but it is going to come. It's going to be something my son sees and the grandchildren will see, and it will become a part in how we bring it in. But unfortunately, as we all know, great ideas get greatly corrupted, because the minute you find something wonderful, you find a way to exploit it. And as we've seen, it doesn't matter how
the internet's a good example. I mean, it's both good.
Perfect example.
I can call
Perfect
somebody
example.
easily across the world. At the same time, I'm getting emails from firearms companies. Like, what am I? It's like, how do they get my email?
What kind of algorithms are they running on us, and what kind of data collection? Right. And so they're gonna, like, you're just sending all your data right into the web.
Into the
and
stream.
How protected is that? How is it going to be used? That's another privacy issue on this.
Well, it's only as protected as is protected, because the minute you find out one wall, somebody is coming up with a way to get around it. I mean, we are very creative creatures, to our credit. For good or for bad, the human mind is an incredible device, capable of doing amazing things, which happen to occasionally be destructive. So
if you equalize the economy, the prosperity, the resources, isn't that everybody's interest to keep it going in a positive way, right? I mean, you give people less reason to go to war.
That is always
right.
Yeah.
I mean,
there is no international consortium or kind of set of guidelines for robotics.
There you go.
No, there's not.
And so that's something that really needs to be understood and kind of confronted. The robots will be what we wanted them to be, and we've never came to an agreement. So now it's it's Wild West free for all, driven.
Well, it's interesting you said that, Thomas, because when I was had a meeting, we're actually organizing a not-for-profit specifically to try to develop a consortium of robot manufacturers and software developers to try to standardize some both the technology side as well as the social consequences side. It needs to happen. It's been done for cell phones. It's been done for a variety of other industries that first created a lot of wealth, and then ultimately they all said, we got to get together and figure out how to make this thing work better, both for society as well as for our own industries, to standardize it. There's quite a number of consortiums now for telecommunications, where previously when the cell phone industry started, we had all sort of these divergent technologies. Everybody was approaching the problem differently. And then someone said, well, wait a minute, let's just all figure out how we can share this data. And one of my friends is on one of those associations, shared this data so that we can standardize the approach to cellular technology. I think robotics needs the same. And that's something that I'm really quite excited that we hope to get ours started here in the next few weeks. We're really quite excited. We need to standardize this. And in the healthcare sector, I want to do primarily to try to get these devices priced down and accessible to where they can be consumer products and not institutional products. Because right now, pretty much the only people who are buying these are institutions, and they do it for novelty. And we want to try to get it down to where I could put one in your mother's ALF, and she could listen to her favorite songs, ask it to play music to her, to read to her, and become her best friend. And it doesn't have to look like a person yet, but at least on the screen, she could see a person. And that's where the human element comes into play. So you're absolutely right, Thomas. definitely need to do that. And I admire the work you're doing and the work that's being done with Sophie. It's really a very important social experiment. I completely agree.
Yeah.
It's a performative medium, so that's kind of been my approach, and I was brought on because of my work with indigenous people to basically ingrain within the robot's personality and psychology and how she acts something much deeper. And that's, I think, part of maybe the success of the fact that it's communicating something in performative forms that relate to something much larger that we're familiar with and comforting. So.
Yeah.
Thomas is a professor of theater and performing arts at the University of Texas, Dallas, and he's traveled the world
really?
with
Okay.
our work into indigenous settings for creating theater. And so as
Well,
a
Thomas,
director,
I'll be in Dallas, around the first week of September. So,
Well,
there's
look
a
me up.
chance.
I mean,
I will.
Please,
We'll
please
send
do.
you
Maybe
emails.
we'll have lunch or something.
That'll work. Yeah, it'd be fun. I'd love to meet with you.
Okay, great.
I actually grew up in Texas, so Dallas. I went to high school and University of Texas at Arlington as well. So I know the area.
Good.
Dallas is one of my favorite towns.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, perfect. Well, I'm
Should
glad
be
we
cooler
met
by
you
then.
here. We're networking.
Yeah, September should be a little bit better. I was
Okay. You know,
when I
want
started to
say
see
that the
109 and
grid-
110. I said,
Yeah.
I'll just stay in Bellevue, Washington, in school for right now.
Yeah.
Okay, and Bellevue, Washington is my hometown. So
Yeah.
it's such
I
a
know.
small world. So I want to say that the grid, you know, all this is taking so much more demand on our power grid. We need to really go for clean energy, right? This is going to take down the world if this is not powered by clean energy. So that's another. So many pieces have to come together to really make this beneficial to humanity, right? So,
It is. I agree.
Thank you, Thomas.
thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, guys.
Nice to
I'm here. Just call on me.
Yeah.
Okay.
But Wilson Night Shadow said, a local assisted living facility just purchased 2 robots. Since
Medical robots.
there's a shortage in this industry.
Chronic personnel shortage in this industry.
So
It seems the future of robotics has arrived.
right. And
Yeah.
and those of us that have had a family member be in an assisted living facility, we've seen the good and the bad. We've seen the problems and how
And I
will they
think
be solved.
loneliness is a huge thing for people.
And you have to remember,
Those
of course,
situations.
that the baby boomers all at the same time are getting to a certain age, and the level of human assisted people is very small. So there's a conflict here, and this might be the solution.
I think it gets ushered in when there's benefits and compassion, right? And care that is hard to deny.
Yeah. Kelly, you had your hand up. Did you want to ask a question?
Kelly Kirksey. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, one, I wanted to say I'm excited about this conversation and what you're doing. And the best thing I heard that you both spoke about was really the ethics with this technology. And it's so critical that people are using the artificial intelligence. And my husband just had prostate surgery with the Da Vinci robot. And it's just so much power and technology, but being able to create a consortium where people that are at the forefront of technology and AI have to go through some type of ethics review, you know? So I love that you all are speaking that language, and I want one of those dog vests.
Well, I'll be sure that we'll get the pre-orders out to this group first, and then take it from there.
Yeah.
And
What is the Da Vinci robot? What is the Da Vinci robot you
So
mentioned?
the Da Vinci robot is a medical robot that does surgeries, and it's operated. The physician is in the operating room, but kind of in a corner, guiding the robot to do the whole entire surgery. So my husband had the robot has 6 arms. So he has 6 incisions where the robot went in, moved organs, took the prostate out, put it in a bag, and pulled it out through his navel. That's probably way too much information, but it's fascinating and frightening all at the same time, what the robots are able to do. And my daughter, she's going to be a senior at Carnegie Mellon, which is one of the top tech schools. She is studying human computer interaction. And during COVID, I
Wow.
thought she was, just held up in her room, about to change the world or take over the world. But she was building an ethics library for technology, and then she went back and she started challenging her professors at Carnegie Mellon to make it a requirement that everybody in
Her.
technology has to at least take one ethics class. We have to think about all of that power and
Good
how we
for
use
her.
it. Hmm.
Wow.
Very
I
true.
want to mention
Very
that
true.
Kelly will join us on a panel discussion with Carol Beckwith and Angela Fisher on African Twilight, a exhibit. These are two photographers that have spent 40 years photographing rituals and ceremonies and tribal life in Africa all throughout. And you'll be part of that team. You're on their team. And we're going to have quite the discussion that's coming up October 9th. So
Fabulous.
looking forward to that.
Yeah,
And
that's
that you're in the wellness sector yourself. And we've got a lot in common, Kelly. So I look forward to further conversations.
I'm
Thank you for
glad to
joining us
be
today. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm glad to be here
Pleasure to
today.
meet you, Kelly.
Yeah. And tell your daughter,
All the
go
best.
girl.
yeah, yeah. I mean, we need to
Yeah.
interview her. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Actually, I'm in Seattle right now because she's finishing up her summer internship with Microsoft. And
Wow.
yeah, it's been phenomenal to be on Microsoft's
Yeah.
campus where they're having meetings in tree houses next to beehives and walking paths. And that's been-
Yeah, Scott. Well, I'm in Bellevue, Washington, which is not far from the Microsoft offices.
Yeah.
And yeah, they do have an impressive campus here.
I just
Several
bought
of them.
Melinda Gates' book on women,
Oh,
the
yeah.
promotion and rights of women. Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
So very cool.
Well, okay, Kelly. Thank you so much. Wonderful
Okay,
addition
Kelly.
to the discussion.
Yeah. We have a robot. We have a robot.
Oh,
And
yeah,
what
so
is
we-
this about?
We have a dog robot coming shortly. That's a full-fledged automated dog with some semi-intelligence that we're looking at, and maybe next time we can have it to stand up and beg or something.
Perfect. Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
so
Wow. Okay.
Woody has his hand
Oh,
up.
Woody. Oh, Woody.
So-
Woody's going to be joining us on, I understand, when
Yes,
Tony and Diana are back on the James Webb telescopes incoming.
Right.
Because Woody worked on the Hubble as well as
He was the engineer that fixed the Hubble
That
when it
fixed
had.
the Hubble,
They
yeah.
came up with the solution when it.
Okay, we're just bragging
We
about
wanted
you,
to-
Woody.
yeah. Hi, Woody.
I'm sure you have lots of good insights here. What's up?
I guess my question was the implications on war. If robots are fighting wars, then all civilizations can get robots, so it ought to be equal. I don't know. War would be a very interesting application that who knows where that would go. I'm just wondering what your assessment of that is.
Yeah.
is this for you, Paul, or is that for me?
Well, I think probably for you.
I think that's what
We all have the same concern, and of course, what's going on with,
Well, the unfortunate reality, we can just see, Woody, with what's even going on now in the Ukraine with Russia, that geopolitics and philosophies will always create environments. They've done it historically, and I suspect that you're probably. I love history, and my father loved history, and watching what human beings tend to do to each other, the reasons that they explain why they do them. And if we look at it right now, Woody, to a large degree, the war in Ukraine is being run by robots. These are drones that are programmed. The Ukrainians are using drones that are programmed to attack Russian artillery and infantry. So basically, robots are already fighting the war to a large degree. The individual face-off of man against man that might have taken place in that Ukrainian industrial area or in the nuclear power plant, where there were actual confrontations, frontline combat, is actually become a smaller part of the whole exercise. Bombing is done by robotic intelligence. Missiles are launched by robotic intelligence.
But it's really sad
drones
when
are
it
operated.
starts to hit the human civilian population and destroy homes and destroy hospitals and destroy schools.
That falls on the part of the operator. So
the operators.
I think Woody is quite right. I mean, these are Woody. We'd almost have to try to turn around and have to one of the Kelly's earlier question, or actually saying actually two people saying we need a consortium. I think Tony had said the same thing, a consortium to manage the ethics of robots. So one would ask the question: could we have a United Nations agreement that Asimov's law is built into every intelligent autonomous device, that would not allow it to actually act against a human being, and that would be applied globally in every microchip that's embedded into every, an ethics chip, if you want to call it, implanted into every robotic device, so that it couldn't do that. So but then again, you defeat the purpose of having weapons if you put ethics chips in them, because they wouldn't be able to execute their primary function, which is destructive.
Mm-hmm.
So unless they were destroying another robot. So you could say, okay, great. And to your point, Bob, we could say the ethics chip says robots can destroy robots, but robots can't destroy people. So you have these robotic wars, and if the robot one
Might as
side
well go play a
loses,
game of chess, right?
yeah, that's right. But the fact of the matter is, then it's now
dice.
but here's what's going to happen: the robots fight each other. One of the sides of the robots wins. Now the human side has to be placed into submission. The one side that lost, and then the side that has the robots. Let's presume the robot can't attack the people, so now they're all throwing stones and rocks at each other.
Maybe we'll advance mediation and find happy solutions and solve problems.
I propose we advance
What is it
human
that you really
thinking
need?
and
What is it
consciousness.
that you really need? How can we work together? Wouldn't that be the way of the future?
That would be a solution. I think Bob's question is valid, but I think it really boils down to the fact that the human condition, we'd have to alter the whole evolution of society and turn around and eliminate the idea that we have to conquer. But unfortunately, this is a matter of the human condition. Even with the United Nations, it's unfathomable. And Europe, to have Russia attacking the Ukraine into this day and age, what the heck causes or the conflict in former Yugoslavia.
And we can't go into politics here.
Well, it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's an ethical, it's an anthropological question.
It is.
Anthropological question.
And we had a private conversation, and because you said you have relatives in Russia, and they, what Putin says, people buy into because they feel like it's for the safety of their own country. It's that same dynamic. Will technology get to the point that it's hard to control a population's understanding of what's going on, that the global knowledge is not available to them, how they're able to shut off the access of information and that kind of thing? That's the thing I wonder
think
about.
that this discussion next week with Herman Green is going to be help answer this, because in an ecozoic era, can we really reach that where it's not my team or your team, it's team Mother Earth, it's team humanity, it's team web of life, it's team Spaceship Earth. That's the team that we all need to be on.
And we need Kelly's daughter and people that generation to tell us, to understand where the hell they see things going.
We need to tell ourselves a new story. We need to see ourselves in a new identity. And I think it all comes back to that.
Right.
Because what's the end game here, right?
Exactly. Tony, you put your hand back up. Do you want to add to the discussion?
Thank you. Yeah. My comment is about a robotic solution that led to the dissolution of the Soviet Union. And we had a weapons race going on in the Reagan era called Star Wars. And there were several systems, many of which I was involved with, one particularly called Brilliant Pebbles. And what was this designed to do? If you're going to respond to a nuclear weapon coming at you, you have only a couple of minutes to do that. That's in the boost phase. If anything happens beyond that, you have almost no chance of intercepting it, and it's going to come and mess up your country. Wow. So this weapon system involved a swarm called Brilliant Pebbles, which would be able to always have eyes over all the launch sites in the Soviet Union or anywhere in the world. Right. As soon as certain signatures came up of a nuclear weapon coming up through the atmosphere in the boost phase, they would immediately respond and attack that. And that was one of the things that was developed. It was developed using probably more clever solutions than the Russians had available. And this was one of the reasons that convinced the Russians they could never outspend us, having more sophisticated weapon systems than we had in the US. We could defend pretty much whatever they were putting up against us. So I think that's kind of interesting. This had to be a smart system. It had to respond on its own. There was no chance to call the president and have the president be briefed and think about it. By then your cities are blowing up. So just a side comment.
That's okay. So that's artificial intelligence that can process data more quickly than any human,
And,
or the delay in relaying
these
that
satellites,
information.
and these satellites are acting robotically. They're acting to the intelligence of the information it's picking up.
Yeah,
And it's only attacking the rocket. It's not attacking the country.
got it. Yeah.
So anyway, that's just a sidebar. I
Yeah.
thought I would
Very
share that.
interesting.
So
Yeah,
let
yeah.
me. Thank
Very
you.
good.
It's a valid sidebar. I remember that really well, and
Thank you,
it
Tony.
was a Cold War won by spending.
Yeah.
Who could spend the most is basically what ultimately ended undermining the economic structure of the Soviet Union. Very important point. Well said.
Good
We
point.
proved they could not outspend us.
Yeah.
They could not outspend
Yeah,
us.
so that was the
Exactly
wrong way
correct.
to go.
Yeah,
Now we'll just.
And you know, Jean is asking the question, you know, will
It's a good
robotics
question.
solve the problems of hunger, poverty? You know, where does the money go?
Yeah.
Will this development increase the need for energy? The business of
Yeah.
selling parts is going
Yeah.
to love it. Impact on waste, junk production. I mean, all these great questions thrown into one quick chat post. But yeah, these are all complications that I'm sure that are on the table that have to be dealt with, because not all
There's
the
social
advancement in
impacts
technology
to
is
this.
good. I mean, and we're really
There's environmental, there's social impacts,
right.
the deployment of any.
yeah, and many of us are ready to throw our cell phones away some days and say, you know, what happened?
Unplug.
The good old days when I can leave my phone at home and
To
and answer.
unplug. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah,
Well, to Gene's question, the one thing I'd like to say is that the earlier part of our dialogue, I had mentioned the globalization of labor. So
Yeah.
to the first question, how do you solve the problems of hunger and poverty? Where do the dollars go? If we can globalize labor with devices like this and give jobs to people in other countries inside of richer countries, then we are distributing the wealth of the richer country, and we are solving the problem of hunger and poverty, because we're moving the money to them while they're providing a service to us here. And that is, I think, the first most important iteration that these devices can give, because it solves a need that we have here, which is labor shortages for menial tasks, and some of them requiring human intelligence because the intelligence in the machine isn't there, or at least human supervision. And it creates a solution for people in the countries that are impoverished, where that distribution of wealth hasn't taken place. So we get to distribute the wealth by providing a mechanism that allows them to participate inside of richer societies, but without, quotation marks, burdening those societies by their physical presence. So I think that we can solve the problem of hunger by being creative in the way we apply the technology and
I'd
distribute
like
the
to hear
wealth.
from Krista. And she says that she loves the openness to new ideas and listening to the young generation to create the harmony with humans and with nature. So, I mean, who's going to inherit the world? It's going to be the future generations.
yeah.
They should have a say in this.
Hey guys, I'm
Hi.
with you. I am sitting outside with G and just enjoying our Sunday morning. So we're not going to come on camera, but just wanted to say hello and thank you for the conversation. It's been a beautiful discussion. And my comment was when you were talking about listening to the next generation and really being open to a new view and a new dream that could be shared around the world. So sorry, there's a lot of background noise here. I'll leave it at that, but thank you for the work you're doing.
Krista and G
Thank you.
joined us on the metaverse.
Yeah.
And here's an idea where a technology, can you help use it to usher in a new identity, a new mission for humanity, a new understanding.
An integration.
Right? It's going to happen through technology. We need to harness technology. And I guess, you know, I think the idea is that all of us are stakeholders in this game.
That's my question too.
All of us.
Of course, we have to be.
We all need to have a voice. We all need to have. People were told vote with our economic dollars. It's going to go beyond that. We need to have a voice. We need to have these conversations. We need to ask these questions. We need to insist, right? We need to insist that. And there's what you take the majority of the population. We all want a better world, one that we can all equally enjoy. right? So I appreciate your compassionate approach and employing. I appreciate your mission, Michael,
Yeah.
in terms
Thank
of
you very
let's
much,
look
Laura.
and see how technology can solve this. Let's look and integrate our dog companions. You know, let's one thing that I wanted to bring up was the friendship across species and the ability for opposing species to that normally were predator and prey, they can even make alliances themselves as well. And I think if they can do that, I think humans do that. But you see a lot on animal to animal friendships. And you see a tiger and a bear and a lion that were all raised together as cubs. Now they're best buddies and they're in a reserve and they hang out together. And you see all these interesting animal species. It's not just humans to dogs, humans to cats, humans to whatever. You know, they themselves can make friendships and find companionship. And the key thing is companionship, right? The key thing is let's hang out together. Let's have some fun. Let's have that exchange.
Right.
So I guess my point is that if I were alone and I know I watched my mother and her friends age out, friends die, they can't hear as well. They can't go across the street and go play as well. Their world becomes very small. We used to hang out with my parents, and after dinner, we'd put our iPad on the table and go, "Hi, Dad, where you want to go?" And we'd be the operators. And he'd bring up, you know,
A
here's...
place you grew up in.
Yeah, and what did I read as comic books as a kid? And what was the music? And what is this and that? He wanted to go down memory lane. And he didn't know how to operate an iPad or his computer. So we would do that for him, and we'd hear the great stories they had to share, and we'd see what, it was wonderful.
Sure.
So I think that of AI device, if I were there in my infirmity, I wouldn't want to bother the kids. I don't have any, right? Can't do that. I wouldn't want to bother the 24. I want to be entertained, but I'd want to dialogue with something that could be responsive. I would want it to show me,
Well, the world of it.
read me a book, take me to Paris, take me over here, show me Leonardo da Vinci, all of that, which I can do in a book or my own computer. But I could love that.
Well, there's
Or,
already a bunch of
the kids in this app who are troubled have a philosophical conversation. If it's come to that, sure.
And the health benefits, there's already research showing the effects of music on dementia, on Alzheimer's, that people hearing music from their own era automatically shifts something in the brain. So if they can have this whole world
Pulls
of
up
knowledge,
their
if they have the
memories.
entire encyclopedia of the world available to them, I mean, that's kind of...
It's about making those last years pleasant and enjoyable, right? And feeling tended to.
Elizabeth is asking an interesting question. Those of us that are familiar with the posture work that we do at the Institute and how that impacts things, there's an element of human consciousness that's kind of put off to the side for today's discussion. But we have to understand, of course, that this entire thing is driven by ourselves and our own humanity, and that idea of whether it gets manipulated into a weapon or whether it's used for the good of humanity comes down to human consciousness, that we have to have some ability that we're tapping into something greater than ourselves to be able to have a concern and an intention of something greater. That idea of ethics. Is ethics something that is written as a rule and as a law, or is it something that's an ethical consciousness within ourselves? So we have an opportunity to tap into that and to draw that into our personal lives. And so that's what I feel like the work of Dr. Goodman, along with the type of discussion we're having today, go hand in hand. That there's an integration of the fact that we do need to continue this development, this expansiveness, this connectedness to the human story of consciousness and who we are and what the human family.
We're about the inner technology, right? We're about the built-in capacity to move into those states of consciousness in which you feel oneness with the universe, in which you feel compassion, in which you feel gratitude. And it's not from the intellect, it's just bubbling up because you're in that zone. So if you're trying to... Who's trying to put chips into the brain?
Oh, that's part of the company developed by
the internet. I mean, come on.
Tesla has a company that's
had a brain issue. They cited a news report about one man who couldn't see or couldn't do something, and a chip in the brain was how he okay, that's a state.
That's a different story.
But it's about being connected all the time. It's not about information download. It's about calling up that connection to the universe
all these
from within,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Michael,
I have to say, Michael, you spent some time in solitary confinement. That is part of your history.
That's
And
correct.
I want to ask, how did that shift your consciousness? You came out of it a little bit like Viktor Frankl. You came out of a hardship with more compassion and more drive to connect and more drive to steer your future. What would that be like, right? What would, you know, it's hard for some people to sit still for 10 minutes and meditate,
Yeah.
right? How did you handle that? And I don't,
Well, to those that obviously don't know, just a short brief history. I was in Eastern Europe, one of the Warsaw Pact countries, and for a variety of reasons, notwithstanding what's explained, I ended up spending quite a bit of time in an Eastern European prison, of which 4 years was in solitary confinement. And solitary confinement there is, in the truest sense of the word, solitary and confined in a very small space with very limited to no resources. I would say that if I were to say that anything came out of that is the fact that we fundamentally are part of a global consciousness. And not only a global consciousness, but a universal consciousness. And that the moments that I thought were me losing my sanity actually proved to be moments of epiphanies. And in the recognition that we are all part of the flow of a universal consciousness. I'm not going to even use the word global because I think that that's too limiting. The cosmos is huge, and time and space is relative, and that we are part of a universal consciousness where we exist and we enter it and we leave it. Our physical bodies are simply mechanical manifestations that embody that consciousness. And whatever you'd like to, as one Star Trek episode, we're just a big bag of water.
yeah.
Okay, I think it was a very poignant statement by an alien to a human being, and he said, "You're just nothing but big bags of water," and he's right. We're nothing but big bags of water. But there is more to us, and that's why I'm not really afraid of where we're going, because I mean all of these things are being driven by that consciousness. Not all of it's good. Clearly, like all things, we struggle with questions, and some of it, but I believe that the physical world is the one that creates the problems, not the one beyond that. So what I took away was that there's more to our current existence than just existing, and that we have to strive as creatures of consciousness to find more depth and meaning to our own existence, and to contribute, or at least make the attempt to contribute in whatever small way we can to the lives of others, whether it's only one person or it's a whole community. And not all of us are successful in doing that, but if we are fortunate enough to be successful, we need to be aware of our relationship to the universe and to every other living thing. And that means to the dogs, to the cats, and I'm a big believer that all living things are interconnected in some way, and that life and all existence has its own harmonics, and we're part of that harmonic. So I could get into a very long discussion on that, which would probably
which is where we
be
started
a whole,
when we met you. That was our discussion.
So
Right.
I would say that's sitting alone for 4 years, and that you either lose your sanity or you become you go outside of yourself and start to look. You go deeply inside of yourself, which is a very hard place. We rarely like to look at ourselves. That I think the hardest thing a human being can do is to actually turn their head around and look inside of themselves first, because oftentimes we won't like what we find there, and then from that, the depth of that, expand out to the infinite space that surrounds us. So there's my 2 philosophical bits.
Well, I have to say, sensory deprivation is one method to enter that zone. I mean, there's many methods to jumpstart the physiology to get into that space, and that's one of them. So it's almost as like your solitary confinement acted as a sensory deprivation chamber for an extended period of time. So, I mean, bravo to you for this beautiful dog human
Yeah.
invention. I love Doggio, AI Doggio.
And also,
And also, bravo to you for surviving something like that and coming out more compassionate and with your sanity intact. I mean, bravo.
yeah.
The sanity part is arguable, but I suppose we'll just leave it. We'll be subjective on that one.
And the assisted living
And
project
applying
of using
technology.
applying technology. I mean, that's going to be critical as we go forward. So yeah, I appreciate that as well. Michael, what a pleasure to know you and meet you and follow your story. And you've given us such great insight into an area of research that we just don't have access to yet. It's growing at a pace and at a level that it's there before we knew it was supposed to be there. I mean, it's coming now in new ways that it's happening, and yet the ethical, the concerns that were expressed are very legitimate. And at the same time, like when the internet came along, I remember traveling to England in a year 2001, and they had street cameras monitoring traffic. And I remember saying to my British friend, I said, "Oh, they would never allow that in the United States. We would never allow ourselves to have cameras on street corners that would impede on our personal privacy." Well, wake up. That's every corner now has cameras. So we have to know that this technology is coming. So how are we going to deal with it? And you've done a great job of bringing that forth. Yeah.
Could you define artificial intelligence for us? Because just like robots, I think that's another term bandied about
Okay. Yeah.
widely, and it's probably employed more widely than we know, right? So what
Well, I just think it's the biggest spin word on the internet right now, and most of the stuff that claims to be AI is not truly intelligent. These are just pre-programmed autonomous pre-programmed functions that follow a very simple algorithm that if response A turns into response B, provide response C. If it doesn't do that, go over here and do this. And if you don't have the answer to that, go ask somebody. Okay, and then get the answer. Then you know what answer to give it the next time. So these are primarily learning it. They're learning algorithms. I think and I'm not sure there is a true AI just yet. There's some debate whether or not Google has succeeded in achieving the capacity for a software program to learn by itself, which means true artificial intelligence will be capable of teaching itself. You'll give it a problem and it'll go try to solve the problem on its own. Now, there are algorithms that attempt to do that in some very rudimentary way, but I would say that I have yet to see anything that really fits the purest definition. And I'm sure that somebody out there probably could pull it up on Wikipedia and say artificial intelligence is defined this way. But this isn't the point of looking for dictionary definitions. The question is, has anything really displayed that capacity yet? No. How's the word used? Everybody used the word AI so that they can pitch a product or get funding. That's it. Pitch a product or get funding. AI is used primarily for that.
Like robotics, it's a loose term, right?
And like love, and I could come up with all sorts of words that are used so loosely without any real understanding, without having the real substance of that.
And that's part of the ushering in of new concepts and new technologies and new ways of being, right? We just need to grapple with those definitions and what they are, and before we fully grok it. Okay, but the chess game between the best human chess player and a robot or AI, what was that? Was that AI?
Chess is mathematics.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just computers.
It's just processing capacity and looking for variables and calculating the variables of the other opponent. It's not really intelligence. It's math, and I don't mean to insult chess players, okay? But the fact is that,
no, but it's the speed of computing all the possible moves.
Basically, yes.
So
And the slight capacity to think. Human chess players were better for a while because they knew how to think in the abstract, so they could actually execute moves that were not logical, which would disrupt the logical progression or the linear progression. But now with the introduction of quantum computing, now they're trying to teach machines or write software programs that think laterally and will actually select the least logical option as being the best option and not the one that they would come to normally through a linear assessment. So they're trying. So now the
So that's
machines
a
are
factor
thinking,
X.
they're trying to teach machines to think in the abstract. The more the machine begins to think in the abstract, the more human-like it becomes. So that, I
Okay.
mean, that's
Maybe,
my,
okay, think in the abstract. Maybe that's part of our genius.
uh, our genius is thinking in the abstract. It's a
Making
person
those
who is
quantum
absolutely
leaps.
no, well, look at this way. A person has no formal education in any science,
Okay.
yet that person creates something that none of those people with the formal education seem to see.
Yeah.
He or she put the dots together that everybody else couldn't, who'd been trained and spent their whole life, just like a computer, in the linear, a collection of knowledge and a linear approach. Yet somebody comes in, picks a few pearls of wisdom out of diverse pieces of knowledge and says, wait a minute, this is a better way to do this. And then everybody sits and goes, genius. And isn't true genius thinking in the abstract?
Yeah,
It
thinking
really is
outside the
thinking in the
box.
abstract.
Yeah.
Well, that's and that term gets thrown around a lot. I'm almost tired of hearing, I think outside the box. Let's just throw the box away. How about
Yeah.
that? Let's just get rid of the
Okay.
box.
You're right.
Okay?
It's a tired cliche. Thank you.
It's a time. Okay, so
Yeah.
let's just get rid of the box.
But it seems
And
to me that, okay, humankind has had its challenges and its punctuated equilibrium, right? It's got to change quickly because conditions change and advent of this, that, and the other. We're coming up to a really unprecedented, it feels like, moment in history where it's going to take that kind of leap to jump across the abyss, right? So I guess
jump across the abyss. But you know, aren't you two, both Paul and Laura, this lovely eclectic group that's collected here, who are participating, trying to jump across the abyss? Isn't your posture, philosophy, or methodology trying to capture and create physiological effects that stimulate some sort of a spiritual or cognizant response, sort of also throwing away the box and just saying, wait a minute, there's a way to do something here? And then actually looking at, and the genius of your founder, looking at the fact that, wait a minute, I'm getting a response that doesn't make any scientific sense,
right.
Yet I'm still getting the response. So the psychologist or the psychologist or the endocrinologist or the neurologist is going to sit there and try to say, well, wait a minute, let me see if I can't figure out the parameters that are precipitating that. Yet in the confines of their great knowledge, they are still a very narrow bandwidth because they can't pull all these other bandwidths in. And then maybe someplace 50 or 100 years down the road, someone will identify and say, this method of movement, I studied martial arts as a young man. And there's a lot of things that our physiology is capable of doing. Look at the amazing things gymnasts can do and how they can control their bodies, or our athletes, or our intellects. We are an amazing piece of engineering. And we should remember, we are a piece of engineering. Our consciousness may not be, but what we carry our consciousness in is, as you said, 14 point, I don't know how many billion years of evolution. For us and possibly other species in other worlds to achieve some sort of a really miraculous container. And so I think robotics, artificial intelligence, and what that's going to bring are simply the continuation of adding to that genius, which is humanity.
And I think that when the trajectory of tool use, right, going back to sci-fi films, you've got the ape picking up the rock, and then suddenly you've got the big spaceship. What was that? 2000? What was that movie?
Space Odyssey 2000.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Right. So you've got this huge trajectory of technology, and where are we going to be 1,000 years from now? 10,000 years?
10 years from now is what I'm asking.
10 years from now.
I'm wondering where I'm going to be in 10 minutes from now.
And the pace of change is accelerating, right? 2 million years, we went and made hand axes, and then look where we are today, right? In such a very short space. So it's interesting. Yeah, it's a tool. It's a tool, and we're in control. I guess that's what you're saying, is we're in control. We're designing the tool. We're shaping the tool. We're employing the tool. We're, this is leverage.
Yeah.
Right? Leverage.
Yeah.
So.
Well, there's that fear that everybody will espouse, which is precipitated by fantasy and fiction, that somehow robots will somehow become
Take
independent
over.
and will take over and destroy their creator, right? This theatrical threat, and that's
Yeah.
what I think it is. It's
The
a
son
theatrical,
killing the father to take
you know,
over.
yeah,
Very, yeah.
theatrical, yeah, the Abel and
Right.
the brothers killing each other. I mean, the end of but I don't really think that that's personal opinion, of course. I don't think that's where it's going to go. I think we're going to find a deep friend
Mm-hmm.
that we're going to be able to integrate to in ways that we still don't even really truly imagine, and that will help us achieve the questions of hunger, achieve the questions of traveling to other worlds, improve our existence, and we'll do it collectively, because in the end of the day, I think we're going to find out that we need each other. I think there's going to be a synergy between this creation as it evolves and its creator.
Absolutely.
Then I think we need to employ the AI to be the therapist and ask humans, what are you so afraid of? Right? What are you projecting this dark shadow? Why is it that you misbehave so much? Why can't you befriend? What are you afraid? I mean, we talked about the death and destruction, that's based on fear. Fear of the unknowns, fear of somebody having more than us, fear that we don't have the biggest robot. You can translate that as you wish. So what is it? I mean, that's why I think it's so important to say we need a new narrative for the human story. We need a new identity. We need to really get to the bottom of who are we, where did we come from, where are we going, and what's it all about?
Right.
And what is the future? The future isn't just going to happen to us. The future is we're all collectively making it step by step, right? Where we feel out of control. That's part of the issue, fear and out of control. But what I appreciate about Krista and Xi with the metaverse. I appreciate about Brian Tucker and Thomas Berry and all those, the old guard. But I appreciate Bucky Fuller. I appreciate all of those who have said, Joseph Campbell, we're on a hero's journey and we're co-writing this story. And there's a larger force at hand that we're co-writing this with.
Right.
And can we maintain that humanity and that sense of we're global citizens, we're really part of a cosmos, and let's take the best of us and let's take the heart as well as the head.
Right.
Which, let's forge a path that makes sense. We're not out of control.
That's it.
Let's employ the technology.
That says it all. Yeah.
Yeah, let's employ the technology, but do it with the ethics, do it with the wisdom, do it with the humanity. I think you're on the right track, Michael.
Yeah.
Everybody here is on the right track. The questions, I've been looking at the comments and the questions, it's really been very, very illuminating. It's lovely to see. And I actually think that what's fascinating to me is while you are studying the traditions of ancient cultures and trying to bring those into our current, the current status. I don't think that these things are mutually exclusive. I really believe that there should be a marriage between those. This idea of that history of man's relationship to the world and his mankind's social structure. No insult to women, we should call it humankind. I think I should correct myself to make this properly gender neutral. But so not to be don't want to be chauvinist here. But the thing is, I do believe that there would be merit that if individuals like yourselves and like the lovely group of very bright, intelligent, well-educated men and women who are participating were to become connected and part of the technology process, then that could absolutely mitigate the negative results. But the problem is that we are siloed. You are focused on this thing, and many like you are focused solely on this humanity and humanism. And the technology folks, except for the highest level, some of the brighter ones who are more affluent are more open to this idea. But technology is evolving without that influence.
Yeah.
And so, do you understand? And because you're sitting in siloed environments, so here's Paul and Laura developing this, and others like you developing this wonderful humanistic approach to our existence to improve our lives. And then here are these engineers and these people running calculations and building these machines who in their personal lives may be interested in what Paul and Laura are doing, but aren't actually considering how to apply that humanistic approach to the development of what they're doing.
Perfect.
Okay, so I just want to end on this. We can end on this. We are about opening the bandwidth of consciousness, right? In a very normal way. This is our capacity. Ancient humans have done this from time immemorial. What we see in folklore and mythology and art is hallmarks of these kinds of spirit journeys. I mean, we can show you those symbolic and gestural and experiential things. So it looks like humankind has been opening its bandwidth for time immemorial. And maybe that's where some of the abstract thinking, the leaps of imagination, the truths, the eternal truths have come, is from that greater sphere. It's hard to do that in waking life. You really need to open the bandwidth, such as you did there in solitary confinement. You had no choice, really, but to open up
I'd say that's putting it mildly. Yeah.
Right? That's actually an enforced technique of long duration for this, right? That is a response that you can have. And you can find that space. Let's call it the zone, right? The Jedi Knights would know that as the Force, right? So it's from there that we get the guidance and we get the inspiration and then we get the insight and we get the compassion and the wisdom. I mean, I think it really it's there in us, but we can open up the door to receive that more widely. And then from there, what I would like to see is I would like to say to inventors, to technical communities, come here, get this vision, let Mother Earth speak to you, let the cosmos speak to you directly within these visionary experiences, and gain the insight to then take the technology and then create what is needed for the future. Because I think that this evolutionary force speaks to us from within. It speaks to us through the imagination, through these states. Many ways to get through these states, by the way. But I think you're right, Michael, that they don't need to be two different silos. They need to come together and communicate. And that's cross-disciplinary. Like you are taking multiple disciplines and combining them to create new technologies and new ways. So I agree. How could we interface with?
We need to find a way to take this. We need to take it to them, because I don't think they'll come to us.
Right. There you go.
Maybe you can help us do that, Michael, because I think
that would be worthy. I think that would be worthy. We need to take it to them. We need to impose on them, as has been historically the case. Those who are humanistic and of high ethical and moral standard are the ones who, let's put this on. I'll just use one great modern example of Ralph Nader. There wouldn't be seatbelts if it wasn't for his persistence. And all of these things that save our lives, which were resisted by the industries, are now part of that, are part of our culture, and part of our social structure in every country. But if he hadn't raised the banged the gong and gone off and done it, then and as I think it was Kelly's daughter who was working on the questions of ethics inside of technology. It's given lip service, but I say we need to take. I say if you do it, take it to them. Don't wait for them to come, because they won't.
Michael, we'll confer with you on how to do this. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been a
pleasure. I want to thank everybody for allowing me to speak. It's been an honor, and I think the questions have been amazing. It's a beautiful group of very bright and very intelligent human beings.
We agree.
It was an honor to participate, and I'm very flattered that the two of you invited me to do so. Thank you so very much.
In my doting old age, when I'm 120, I'll be using one of your robots to
probably,
giving me my bedtime time and getting me my glass of water.
Well, I'm as somebody asked me, I think it was Mick asked the robot to dance. I'll probably be asking mine to dance with me as well.
Everybody.
How many patents do you hold, by the way?
Right now, 2. I've got about 4 or 5. I'm going to be filing here shortly, also related to similar technology.
Wow.
I've asked everybody to unmute. They can all say goodbye to you and say thank you so much, Mike.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
I'll get your email from
okay.
Laura.
Of course.
Yeah, please do so. Yeah,
All
welcome
right,
to share it with
everybody.
anyone. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.
So much for your
Bye-bye for now.
So much, Michael.
Bye-bye, everybody. Take care. Thank you, Dave. Thank you so much. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye, everybody.